friends, and welcome to the Imago Nutrition Podcast. And let us be hopefully one of the first people to say Happy New Year. We are excited for 2023. In fact, Danielle and I just had a couple hours long call about kind of our hopes and dreams for the year. And so we're excited about 2023. We hope you are as well. And we are mindful that perhaps some of you are listening to us for the first time because it's the new year, and oftentimes us ourselves included, we seek out new resources for health and wellness. And so if you are a first-time listener coming to us at the beginning of the year, we are excited to help. We're excited to navigate some nutritional issues with you this year, and would love to hear from you as well. We often answer questions directly from the audience. And so if you have a question for us, feel free to head over to imagonutrition.com/podcast, and you can actually just send us a question if you have a nutrition question you'd like us to answer this year for you. And so with that, again, because we might have some new listeners, I thought, Danielle, we might as well introduce ourselves or reintroduce ourselves to our existing listeners, and just kind of talk about who we are and why we do what we do. And so with that, I'll toss it over to you. Ladies first, you want to just introduce yourself to anyone that might not know about the incredible Danielle Glesney?
Oh, Mark. I'm Danielle, and I am a dietitian nutritionist. I'm also a certified diabetes care and education specialist. I love working with families. I love a lot. I obviously work in diabetes a lot, so I like that topic as well. And high cholesterol, I really like that topic. So yeah, I'm excited to grow in different areas this year. So hopefully we'll give you some new opportunities like classes or things like that. And maybe allow you to learn about the ones that we've had in the past year too. So
yeah, very cool. And my name is Mark, and we have the same last name, but we are not married. And so Danielle is my sister-in-law. It's funny, we had a post on Instagram, and someone came up to me at the gym that saw it because it was on a post that also went out to a lot of people in the city I live. And someone came up and said, "Hey, I saw you and your wife do nutrition." I said, "Well, it's a little confusing. We do have the same last name, but that's my sister-in-law and not my wife." So if you're just getting introduced to us, yes, it is Mark Glesney and Danielle Glesney, but we are not married. We are brother and sister-in-law. And so, and Danielle lives up in the St. Louis area, and I live in the Nashville area. And so we came together in mid-2021 and decided we'd both been doing nutrition for years and years and years, and decided to combine our powers and become a unified force. And so we created Imago Nutrition to serve people and change lives with nutrition. And so, as I said, my name is Mark. I am certified nutrition science from the Stanford Center for Health Education, and have been doing nutrition coaching since, I believe, 2008. And so, again, has always been just a passion of mine. Big fitness guy, love sports, was in the military, but ultimately understood early on that nutrition is really what fuels all of that. And so, and Danielle's very humble. She wouldn't tell you that she was a D1 swimmer at the University of Minnesota or anything like that. So she has a lot of that passion as well. So all that said and done, I don't want to go on and on about ourselves necessarily, but we're doing something a little different in January with the podcast. And so we love answering questions. We're going to continue to do so moving forward. But we thought it'd be fun to take an opportunity at the top of the year to discuss some popular diets because, like it or not, no matter how you feel about diets, this is the time of year where many people are gravitating toward them. Perhaps they're getting introduced to a diet they've never done before. Perhaps they're circling back to a diet they have tried before. Or perhaps there is just a heightened awareness or a heightened acceptance or curiosity about diets. And so we wanted to take a look at a couple popular, we can't cover them all, of course. We want to take a look at a couple of the most popular diets currently. It's 2023. This could change by next year. It could change the next coming years. But we want to take a look at a couple of these and do a series on some of these popular diets. And so today, if you saw the title of the episode, you already know. Today, we're going to be talking about the ketogenic diet, aka keto. Now, as I joke, if you're over the age of 3, you've probably heard of this diet because it is arguably, Danielle, would you agree? Is this the one you hear most about these days?
I would definitely say so. Yeah.
Yeah, I think this and intermittent fasting currently, which is a little bit more recent, that one's really picked up steam more recently. I would say keto is for the last couple of years, at least 5, 10, 15 years, has really picked up a lot of steam. And I arguably get more off, the cuff questions or in passing questions about keto and intermittent fasting, but keto has definitely been a resounding trending diet for years now. And so here's kind of our outline. If you don't mind, I'll kind of give us a roadmap of where we're going. I'll lead this probably quite a bit. We'll certainly look for insights, Danielle. I'll toss it over to you at times. And maybe in the next episode, you'll do, kind of lead me through some stuff, and we'll kind of ping pong back and forth. But here's a bit of our roadmap for the day. We want to first just kind of talk about what is keto. Okay. So what is it when we say the ketogenic diet? What is it? So that's number one. We'll start there. Then we'll go into how does it work? So we're not going to get into a lengthy explanation necessarily. We're not going to go all the way through the biochemistry or anything like that, but we will give you a bit of a sense of how it works underneath the hood, if you will. We'll talk about some pros and some cons. So we're going to do our best to be balanced in that sense. There are some pros. There are also some cons. And at the end of this, we'll talk about, do we recommend keto? Why or why not? And if we don't, what do we recommend instead? And so with that as our sort of outline, let's start there. Does that sound good, Danielle? Any thoughts at the top before we kind of get into it?
No, go for it.
All right. So let's just talk short version, kind of what is keto. Again, the full name is the ketogenic diet, but it's more commonly referred to as keto. And so in the simplest terms, it's really a low carb, so very low carbohydrate. We have 3 macronutrients, right? Carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. This diet in particular goes very low carb, and that resembles the Atkins diet you may have heard of, but this one is high in fat. And so it's a low carbohydrate, high fat diet. Interestingly enough, it was not invented as a weight loss solution. It was developed in 1924 by a doctor at the Mayo Clinic, Dr. Russell Wilder. And it was actually developed for the treatment of epilepsy, specifically pediatric epilepsy or children with epilepsy. And there's a whole reason why it was developed for that, why it has shown success in that realm. We can't get into all that here, but suffice it to say, it is a current trending diet. It has a lot of, again, attention to it. And so the question is kind of, what is it? Why are people gravitating toward it? And so, again, it's low carb, high fat. And what it does is it puts your body into a state of ketosis. And this is simply a metabolic state that occurs when your body switches from burning glucose or carbohydrates for energy, and it switches to burning fat. Now, that sounds very enticing. We'll talk a little bit about how the body does that and what are some of the pros and cons with that. But that's essentially what it is. It's inducing a state of ketosis where your body switches from burning glucose, aka sugar, from carbohydrates. It switches to burning fat. And so there's a couple modern versions of keto. We wanted to do a little justice that there is not just a single solution. There are versions of keto. I've outlined just 4 real quick that I've commonly heard. There might be more. There might be some weird ones that your neighbor's inventing right now as we speak. But in general, we've got 4. Number 1 is the standard ketogenic diet, which is, of course, low carb, moderate protein, and high fat. There's a general percentage breakdown in the standard keto diet that is 70% fat, 20% protein, 10% carbs. Okay, so 70, 20, 10 in terms of fat, protein, and carbs. That's a standard ketogenic diet. The second is a cyclical ketogenic diet. This involves what we call higher refeed days. And so there are days where you are higher carbohydrate, but there are other days where you are more typically standard ketogenic. And so what this could look like is 5 days following a standard ketogenic diet, but then you have 2 days where you increase your carbohydrates. And so it's a cycle, if you will. You may have also heard of carb cycling. It's a bit in that realm of carb cycling as well. So you've got, again, one example would be Monday through Friday, I'm on a standard keto, and then on Saturday and Sunday, I have higher carb intake. So that's a cyclical ketogenic diet, okay? A third would be targeted ketogenic diet. This is one where you simply add more carbs in and around your workouts. Okay, so it's specifically using carbohydrates in a narrow focus to fuel workouts pre and post, whether it's endurance or strength or something like that. So that's a targeted ketogenic diet. A little more loose because that really just depends on your schedule. When are you working out? How often? Et cetera, et cetera. So it's a little bit more loose in that regard. There's no real numerical rule with that one, if you will. So that's the targeted ketogenic diet. And then there's the high protein ketogenic diet, which again, it's still low carbohydrate, high fat, but we're starting to build out a little bit more protein within that. And so it's similar to the standard keto diet, but has more protein. So a typical percentage breakdown would be 60% fat, 35% protein, which is the high end of what we call the AMDR, the high end of the associated macronutrient distribution range, and only 5% carbs. So you actually go lower on carbs in the high protein ketogenic diet than you do in the standard. And so all that said and done, that's kind of the four in terms of what is keto. Any thoughts on that, Danielle? Any insights, perspectives?
No, I think when you describe keto and you're talking to people that are on keto, it has a mindset of all or nothing. You know, that when you think about 5% and 10% carbs, that's almost like you accidentally get that. You know, you don't seek out 5% or you don't seek out 10% of your diet for carbohydrates. That is I'm eliminating carbohydrates. So I think of this diet as elimination diet. And when I think of that, you know, one, an all or nothing mentality can really lower your chances of success. So I'm not trying to jump to the disadvantages of this diet. I'm just saying, like, as if a classification, if you will, of what kind of diet this might be. There's kinds of diet that kind of focus on increasing certain foods and, you know, promoting more balance. But I would classify this diet as an elimination type diet because you're not seeking out 5% or 10%. That would just happen accidentally. Because when you're talking to these clients, oh, I can't have that. I can't have that. Those are the words that they use because, you know, they're working to meet those percentages that you just mentioned. So.
Yep. 100%. 100%. So that's what keto is and some early insights into that. So let's talk real quick, if you don't mind, just real quick. Again, another short version of sort of how does keto work. This is not going to be all of it. It would take too long to describe it, again, down to a biochemical level. However, real quick, here's a quick primer on how does it work? And then we'll get into some pros and cons. And then if we recommend it, you might kind of already caught up on a signal of whether or not we recommend it. But we might surprise you in the pros and cons areas. So stick with us. So real quick, how does keto work? We mentioned ketosis. We talked about low carbs. We talked about high fat. So how does this all work under the hood, if you will? How is the engine of this diet working? So number one, real quick, just know that carbohydrates metabolize, they break down into glucose. Glucose is just another word for sugar, okay? All carbs break down to sugar. It's not a bad thing. It's a normal thing. That's how our body operates, okay?
Your brain and your kidneys need all that sugar.
Correct. Yeah, correct. I mean, we could get into a long list of the benefits of carbohydrates, right? Yeah. We're trying our best to be balanced in this approach, but we're trending one direction, so stick with us. So you're right. So cells, I mean, down to a cellular level, your organs, yes, like your brain, your kidney, all of that, yes. But even down to a cellular level, your cells use glucose as fuel. It's the most readily available fuel for your body. So just think that all that your body is doing consistently, even when you're sleeping, by the way, is requiring energy. It is operating. It is on. The engine is always on, okay? And so just like a car sitting in a driveway with its engine on, it's requiring fuel. It's requiring gas, let alone when you exercise, et cetera, et cetera. So carbs metabolize as glucose or sugar. Your cells use that glucose as fuel for an innumerable amount of functions within our body, okay? And when that energy store, that energy source, I should say, is not available, yes, it is true that the body shifts in an amazing way. It shifts its main fuel source from glucose to these molecules known as ketones, okay? So this is the premise behind that. These ketones are formed from the breakdown of fatty acids. Okay, so now that starts to remember. So fats get metabolized into fatty acids, carbs get metabolized into glucose, protein into amino acids. Okay, so these ketones are formed from the breakdown of those fatty acids coming from, again, a high fat diet. We're in a low carb, high fat, so you've got a plethora of fat to be used to produce these ketones. And it's interesting to note that when the glucose is severely lacking, okay, the body, yes, is going to create ketones in this amazing way because your body is adapting. In one sense, it's being starved of a certain nutrient. Therefore, it is finding a different pathway to achieve its energy needs. And when glucose is severely lacking, you need to keep in mind that muscle can also be broken down into amino acids. Protein is broken down into amino acids, right? And converted into glucose. So your body's going to try to find ways to create these energy sources that it's lacking. So your muscle can actually get broken down into amino acids, which can then be used for energy in your body. So all that's to say is that this is taking place in this state of ketosis, is that your body has switched its main source of fuel from glucose to ketones, which is coming from fatty acids. But keep in mind that your body, under what I would say is a moderate form of duress or distress, can also start to break down muscle because what it's searching for is the energy it needs to operate, not just in the normal things, but above and beyond the normal things within your body. Okay. So did I do a good job? Did I do any justice there on the nutrition science side of things? Danielle? Yeah. Okay. All right. So let's talk pros and cons. I'm going to get Danielle involved because y'all are already tired of me talking too much. So can we be a little honest that we wanted to put together a pros and cons list, but we struggled, didn't we? I struggled. Okay, so I struggle because I talk with a lot of folks about keto. And if you're on keto, we love you. We care for you. Stick with us. Work with us. Let's talk about this, right? But I did struggle to find some pros to this, apart from some very focused data points. However, you've got some very poignant, or at least a couple poignant pros for the ketogenic diet. Is that true?
Sure. Yeah. You want me to start?
Yes,
so with the standard approach that you mentioned, if I'm not mistaken, that specific approach for the ketogenic diet can result in some glycemic control, improvement in insulin resistance, and lipid metabolism in those with type 2 diabetes. I think the frustrating part about nutrition is there's always new studies out there, and this is not necessarily well-known or across the board or works for everyone type of a thing. So it really kind of depends on, like I said, the how you do it, what I know about diabetes, my 10 years of experience about diabetes. The other two forms of the ketogenic diet that he described would probably not experience some glycemic control. So the lipid metabolism is very interesting because, when you are increasing that fat, it depends on your fat sources, but in general, that is the pro that I can give you. And another pro is it does give someone a jump start in weight loss. It is obviously eliminating a whole food group, basically. And that can really give you a jump start in weight loss, which can obviously increase your encouragement, your motivation. So I think that could also be considered a pro as long as you're taking the right steps to learn about the next steps as using this as a short-term method, if you will. So I think those are the two pros that I have for you today, Mark. Is that good?
Yeah, that's good. And you dovetailed right into sort of my first pro as well. And you're so right. I didn't plan on mentioning this, but you did. So I'll key off it real quick. Having an exit plan is key. So many people do not understand that when you go into a diet system, you need to have an exit plan. And that's one of the biggest things that causes that stumbling is that you're either on it, back to what you said, the on and off mentality, or all or nothing. You're either all in keto or what? Or you're back to how you were eating before. Do you have an exit plan? Or you're reintroducing carbohydrates at some point? So in diets in general, this is not just picking on keto. You have to have an exit plan. Okay. Even with my weight loss clients, we talk about phasing. We talk about coming out of a weight loss phase. We talk about moving into a reverse diet where we're building their calories back up and then also building their metabolism with that. We're going into maintenance phases. We're looking at muscle building phases. We're going back into fat loss phases. So just know that you've got to have an exit plan. Too much of diet culture is just getting you into the diet and then they leave you there with no exit plan. Okay. So with that, you said it right. I mean, there's anecdotal evidence that it, quote, helps people lose weight. It does jumpstart the weight loss process. Now we'll talk about exactly what that looks like real quickly. But for some people, and it kind of makes sense, you just eliminate an entire nutrient, chances are you're going to eat less. But keto does not cause weight loss. We'll talk about that in a second. However, motivationally, it does sometimes jumpstart the weight loss process. Anecdotally, people also talk about feeling less hungry. It kind of makes sense because you got high fat, you've got relatively high protein, at least relative to carbohydrate intake. And so some people talk about being very full. You don't need to go low carb to feel full, by the way. But that's some anecdotal evidence. I stretched on this one. I do somewhat appreciate that it sometimes can break people out of the low fat mentality, because fat in the 90s was just a target of so much by the food companies, by our American food system, the diet system. Everything was low fat, low fat, low fat. Of course, if you look on the label, you just see they just introduced a bunch of sugar into those products to keep them tasty. But we went through this whole low fat. So fat makes me fat, right? We've all heard that. It's not true. So one stretch of a pro could be that it might break certain people out of that low fat mentality. But again, but what it does is it puts you then into a low carb mentality. And so you're basically choosing one over the other. And I will say this, and I know you know this as well, there are health benefits for very specific individuals. Okay. Now, in context, we're talking about keto in January. Why? Because a lot of people that don't have any of these considerations are maybe dabbling in it, or have folks or friends or family that are dabbling in it that are not one of these very specific cases. So we already mentioned that keto was invented for children with epilepsy. Okay. So not to be a jerk, but some people are like, hey, what do you think about keto? I'm like, hey, are you a child with epilepsy? They're like, well, no. I'm like, then you don't need to be doing keto. Okay. That's what it was invented for. Okay. But we need to respect that there is a very powerful, understanding of keto's effect on children with epilepsy. I've seen this in the bodybuilding. I'm not a bodybuilder, but in the bodybuilding space and in the athletic space, we have seen some people use keto to reduce body fat in a short period of time. But keep in mind, those are generally people that have an exit plan. Those are people that are phasing in and out based on their goals of performance, athletic endurance, bodybuilding, et cetera, et cetera. So they have an exit plan. It's one little stop on their journey that they are planning to use as a quick reduction in body fat for a short period of time. And then they move into their next phase and they have very defined goals and they have very defined process for that. And then I will say this, future facing, keto is being studied for its potential in mitigating symptoms for patients with progressive neurological disorders like Parkinson's disease. However, scientific research is being done. We need more. It has not confirmed the benefits for those populations. It's what I would call, quote, promising, but not proven. So there may be more rolling out. I hope there are. I hope that we find some of these nutritional strategies to help folks that are suffering from things like Parkinson's. But keep in mind, that's in a very select group in our population. Okay. So hopefully we did our justice talk about some of the pros. But now let's move to the cons. So you want me to start with the cons, Danielle, or do you want to kick it off?
No, go for it.
All right, I'll do it. So number one, it's difficult to sustain. Okay. We've seen in research that the farther you swing someone, let's just talk about general weight loss, general population, generally healthy, not one of those select parts of the population that we mentioned in the pros. Okay. For that, it is hard to sustain. Research has shown the farther you swing people from the baseline of how they normally eat, the less likely they are to succeed long term. Okay, let me say that again. Research has shown that the farther you move someone, or the farther someone moves from their normal eating patterns, doesn't mean there aren't changes, but that they dramatically make changes. The farther you swing from that baseline, the less likely they are to succeed. That's why when we go through coaching with people, whether it's weight loss, muscle gain, whether it's high cholesterol, high blood pressure, diabetes, we're talking about small, incremental, gradual changes over time. It's not as sexy as, hey, 20 pounds in 4 weeks. It's not as sexy. We're not selling sexy. We're selling nutrition science. We're selling evidence-based approaches. And so it's very difficult to sustain keto, and that's one of the biggest detriments to it, is that people start eating radically different. And like we said, they don't have an exit plan for when they do want to reintroduce carbohydrates. And then a lot of times what happens is they not only gain the weight back, but they gain even more. It's very common. Okay. Number two, keto often creates nutrient deficiencies. Okay. Vitamins, minerals, fiber. And by the way, fiber is a carbohydrate. And so I have a fun conversation talking with a friend, not just me being a jerk to some stranger at the grocery store, but a buddy of mine came up who was at the time on keto. He has since recovered. And he said, Mark, I just came to a point where I realized carbohydrates are not essential. Now, technically, he's correct. Essential is defined as something your body cannot create. And so your body does actually have methods to create glucose. It can create some of these energy sources. So there's a debate about the essential nature of carbohydrates, and we understand that that's a complex conversation. However, all that's to say, he said, look, I just realized that carbs are not essential. They're not necessary. They're useless. And I said, what do you think about fiber? He said, well, fiber is super important. That's why I eat my veggies. He goes, that's why I eat my 10% or my 5%. And I said, fiber is a carbohydrate, right? And he dead stare. It's like, I mean, you can't in one hand say carbs are worthless and then also say fiber is important, because fiber is a carbohydrate. So anyways, All right, I'll stop being a jerk, but that's just a fun fact for your day. And these are the nutrient deficient. It is. I thought so. So thank you. But these nutrient deficiencies are what cause what is known as the keto flu. Okay. It's one of the only diets that has a term associated with a flu-like experience when you're going through it. Okay. So there's the keto flu, or feeling foggy. And that is generally because people are now deficient in certain vitamins and minerals. Okay. Another one would be this high fat mentality that I talked about. Often leads to high saturated fat intake. And we know saturated fats do have a negative impact on heart health, cholesterol, etc. So keep in mind, there are saturated fats and there are unsaturated fats. And so what happens is when you pop the lid on, hey, all fat is the same, all fat is good, all fat is equal, go high fat, what it tends to introduce is a lot of high saturated fat. And so folks that go on keto tend to have elevated risk of high cholesterol, heart problems, etc., etc. I might pause right there. Anything to add to that, Danielle, from your experience? I've got 2 or 3 more, but.
Oh, for the cons, I have some long-term consequences, but like you said, I don't think a lot of people can maintain it long-term. But the long-term consequences can be kidney stones, liver disease, and possible increased cardiovascular risk, as you just mentioned, as well as vitamin and mineral deficiencies. So.
Nailed it. And this is one of those times, by the way, sometimes we just do a podcast where we're just comparing notes along the way. This is one of those, like, we didn't prepare and merge our notes or anything like that. So part of the nuance of this podcast is us getting together and comparing our notes. And so that's just a healthy overlap with what we're seeing in the research and with the clients that we work with. So I would add a really fun one. There's a renal risk with keto. So people with kidney disease in particular have an increased risk of requiring dialysis due to the additional ketones in the renal system that the body has to process. So that's a very real a very real risk of this diet. They also just very simply run a risk of dehydration. And so carbohydrates come with water. Okay, I think it's every gram of carbohydrate comes with 2 to 3. I keep hearing different numbers, 2 to 3 to 2 to 3.7 or 2 to 4. I just say 2 to 3 grams of water with them. That's the point. Think about it, carbon with hydration. That's carbohydrate, right? So, and glycogen, when it gets broken down, is what helps hold water in our body, and that's a good thing. And so people that are reducing their carbohydrates to a drastically low level often experience dehydration, which has also, that's just a ripple effect of many different things that come from that. So from there, you can have headaches, you can have muscle fatigue, you can have a lot of different things with severe dehydration. And there's also, I would say too, to your point, there's just a real risk of things like food obsession, psychological stress, even binging, because severe restriction of a food group, or an entire nutrient, when we're talking about carbohydrates, can lead to your body beginning to reach for those in an obsessive way or in a psychologically tough way, I guess. And binging on those foods when you do allow them. And so that becomes a real risk as well. So that's it for my cons and your cons, I think, as well. Did we summarize that? I think we I think we tried to go balanced. We tried to give them some pros, but I think there are definitely, apart from those specific population segments, I think the cons in this regard really outweigh it, which leads us to the last part. Do we recommend keto? And I would say, in short, no. Danielle, you've been a dietitian for 10, 11, 12 years now. Have you ever recommended keto to a normal, healthy adult for weight loss?
No, I have not ever recommended keto.
Nor have I. So in short, again, no, we don't recommend keto. And by the way, so let's just talk real fast about weight loss. I mentioned this earlier. Keto has not been shown to be more effective than even high carbohydrate diets when calories are equated. Okay. So I've gone over this a lot. Negative energy balance, where you consume fewer calories irrespective of their macronutrient distribution, right? So if you bring in fewer calories than your body burns or expends on average over time, that's what's known as a negative energy balance. That is not a way to lose weight. It is the way to lose weight. It is not a method of weight loss. It is the mechanism of weight loss. And so someone that goes into the keto diet and says, I lost weight, keto causes weight loss. The reason they lost weight was because within the keto system, they put their body into a negative energy balance. But if you go into keto and consume more calories than you burn every day, you're going to gain weight because energy balance dictates weight adaptation in the body. And they've really put this to the test in recent years. Many, many studies have come out and shown us that whether you're doing low carb or high carb, if you equate the calories between those two groups, weight loss is the same. So it is not particularly effective for weight loss. What dictates weight loss is a negative energy balance. And that's what I teach all my weight loss clients, is how to understand, how to control, how to utilize negative energy balance without having to remove your favorite foods or dramatically reduce nutrients or food categories. So with that, no, we don't recommend keto, but let's talk a little bit about what then we do recommend, okay? So we teach something known as what we call the 4 pillars of nutrition. And in this 2023, you may have heard us talk about this before, but we're going to be putting out a lot more material on the 4 pillars of nutrition. And really what this breaks down to is fulfilling your body's core nutritional needs. What are the foods that you should consume most often? It doesn't mean this is the only foods you can eat, because that would be a diet. However, if you're looking to have a healthy healthy source of all these macronutrients, protein, carbs, and fats. And there's delineation between each of those. You know, there's complete proteins, incomplete proteins, there's unsaturated fats and saturated fats, there's simple carbohydrates, there's complex carbohydrates, there's fiber considerations, et cetera, et cetera. So we're trying to make this as easy to remember as possible. So what we teach is known as, again, the 4 pillars of nutrition. And it goes like this. Number 1, lean meat, seafood, and dairy. Number 2, fruits and vegetables. Yes, all of them. 3, whole grains. And number 4, nuts and seeds. So the 4 pillars of nutrition are lean meat, seafood, and dairy, fruits and veggies, whole grains, nuts and seeds. Again, is that the only thing you can eat and drink? The answer is no. I didn't mention whiskey, and I like to have whiskey from time to time. It's not a part of the 4 pillars of nutrition. However, 80, 90, 95%, depending on how you want to approach your health goals, of what I am consuming, of what we are consuming, what we recommend consuming, is lean meat, seafood, and dairy, fruits and veggies, whole grains, nuts and seeds. Okay.
And legumes. So, you can't put every, food in the title. So
yeah, talk to us about that real quick.
Legumes.
Yeah.
You're putting in the fruits and veggies.
And like the difference between beans. Yeah. And the difference between beans and legumes.
Beans, legumes, lentils, they're all, really great for fiber. So we put them in the fruits and veggies category. They're a good source of protein, also as well. So
fiber. Yep.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that? Just
no, I love that. I love that, gives you a good foundation. And I think just for some practical guidance in going into the new year, just remember to set SMART goals. SMART stands for specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time bound. And if it's time bound, that means you reassess and you set a new one.
Yep.
So I think that's going to give you the most success if you are specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time sensitive in your goals. So,
and by the way, this applies to areas outside as well. This is an acronym that if you Google it, you'll see there's a lot. This is a very useful acronym. It's a very useful system. And a very simple way to use that is to just bring out a piece of paper, write SMART across the top, and then draw lines between the letters, and then start listing in the rows your goals, and then start to do exactly what she said, go through each bucket and actually plug it in. My wife and I have done this in no less than 7 different areas of life, in our faith, in our fitness, in our financials, in our health, in our social, and all that sort of stuff. You can just lay out very specific. It's a very cool exercise is to go through your goals. And so if you have a nutrition goal, if you have a weight loss goal or a muscle gain goal, or reducing reducing high blood pressure or high cholesterol, it is starting to let us know if we can help, of course, but starting to set very specific goals that work through that. And it's a way that you can start to hold yourself accountable as well. And that's really what's key. Is that motivation is high at the top of the year. We're not against that. It's okay. We're not grumpy about that, but we want to make sure that you're channeling that into practical, sustainable methods. It's kind of like what we say at the top of the year. I say, it's great to have a plan for January, but if that plan doesn't last through December, you probably need a new plan. Okay. And so, so that's good. I think that's a huge place, and it's a great place to end too, is just taking a look at those SMART goals. Could you reiterate that again? If someone was listening, like, I didn't catch that.
Specific.
Just go through that acronym again.
SMART is specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time bound. And I love how you said, write it down, Mark, because that is another really great, tool, is to have visual reminders. I mean, sometimes you'll have a goal and you're like, oh shoot, I totally forgot. I
don't know why I didn't get it done.
Because I totally forgot. Yeah. Yep. So
very cool. All right. With that wraps up the first one of January. So we took a look at keto. I hope that we were able to give you a balanced approach to that, walk you through kind of what that is, how it works, pros and cons, and ultimately our recommendation relative to that. And so if you have any questions about that, feel free to reach out to us. You can always contact us by going to Imago Nutrition, imagonutrition.com/contact. Let us know if you have any questions. If you're thinking about keto, you're coming out of keto, you've got friends on keto, if you have any questions, feel free to just shoot us a message, see if we can help. And if this podcast was helpful, if this episode was helpful, we would be honored if you subscribed, leave us a review, let us know how we're doing, and share it with a friend. Not to be combative, but you've got some friends that are thinking about or working through keto, send them this episode, see what they think, maybe strike up a conversation, go to coffee and have a chat about the things that we discussed. And so if you're on social media, you can follow us at Imago Nutrition. So at Imago Nutrition across all your favorite social media platforms. And as always, we would like to thank the band Happy Pill for our theme song, which is Thinkin Bout Food, because on the Imago Nutrition podcast, we're always thinking about food. We'll see you.